Who is really safe in the United States anymore? Yesterday's Supreme Court.
All right, shalom. So there's a lot of things that Trump is doing that a lot of people don't understand what he's doing and why he's doing it. There's a lot of things that are benefiting everybody, regardless of whatever your belief system and what have you is, that he is reinforcing, right? Because the United States of America was prominently created and founded by two parties, basically, and that's the two-party system that we currently have for the most part. We have the Republican side of it, which is more on the Christian dynamic and wave. That's a lot of people perceive that way. You have Christian people that are proclaiming themselves to be Christian anyway on both sides of it, right? Then you also have Freemasons, right? Like George Washington, Freemason slave owner. Benjamin Franklin, Freemason slave owner. Benjamin Franklin was affiliated with the Hellfire Club out of Ireland, where their motto was "Do as thou wilt." Perform satanic rituals underneath the church and understand church above them was just equally satanic. Freemasons support the Democrats, who support the KKK and instill Jim Crow laws to this day. So this permeation that we live in a democracy is a fallacy. We live in a constitutional republic, not a democracy. If you read the Federalist Papers, they said quite clearly that they could get away with it being a republic, and that's what they wanted because everybody had a similar mindset. And that's why the Democrat narrative is to try to swindle everybody into a diversity and inclusion mindset where, well, let's mitigate your First Amendment freedoms and what have you, and in support of, well, let's have this broader sense of diversity and inclusion, which still, if you understood the Bible as much well as I do, is still a part of the nation, right? You have natural law, and then you have Yahweh's laws, the Ten Commandments. The First Amendment established the clear principle of the separation of church and state. So the state has no control of the church, and the church has no control of the state. However, what's been abundant is that and permeated for a long period of time, is that the state wants to act like it's the church. It wants to create laws, Jim Crow laws, in other words, and everything else that mitigate the rights of the people, right? So what Trump is doing with a lot of things that he's doing now, keep in mind, an executive order can't supersede the Constitution, but his job as the commander-in-chief, right, written directly into the United States Constitution, is protect and defend the United States Constitution, right? So any act of Congress and what have you that violates the rights of the people is automatically null and void of law. Getting rid of the 14th Amendment, that is for the slaves, right? As he's indicating when it comes to the citizenship aspect of things, right? It's for the slaves. Let's get rid of all these laws that are on the books that were leaning towards favoring the slaves, and let's have equality rather than diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is actually being utilized to marginalize everybody else in favor of one race or what have you. When it comes to the Ten Commandments on the biblical aspect, it has no basis on your heredity. It has no basis on your skin tone. It has everything to do with what you do, right? If you knew anything about Martin Luther King Jr., that was his principle, right? Let's not judge a person based on their skin tone, but their character, their heart, right? You read the Federalist Papers. That's the whole principle behind that, too, is the purity of the heart. They didn't like what the monarchy was doing. That's why they didn't want to have a strong centralized government, with the federal government having the supreme sovereignty over the people and dictating to the people what they're going to do in each respective state, right? Again, in the United States Constitution, it states quite clearly that each state is guaranteed a Republican form of government. So when the federal government is creating laws and acts and what have you that violates the rights of the people, which is prominently done by the Democrats, I'm not going to say Republicans are benevolent in their aspirations either, but that is a violation of due process of law, right? So that is grounds for impeachment and everything else, amongst a multitude of other things. So that's why he did everything what he did, so where he could commit a crime is to get rid of the actual crimes that are being committed. Look at what happened with mask mandates and vaccine mandates. You had Kathy Hochul that ignored the New York State Supreme Court order to rehire those that refused to get vaccinated and give them back pay, because she's still under the guise that she had the authority to do that, and she thinks that she's the supreme sovereign in New York State and that she has more authority over the people than the people themselves, right? Article 2, Section 2 of the New York State Civil Rights Code, supreme sovereignty of the people, no authority under any pretense whatsoever can be exercised over the citizens of the state without, paraphrasing last part, consent of the people. Legislative Act, right? In Article 15, Section 290 of the Executive Code, states quite clearly it's the police power to protect the rights of the people for the public health, safety, welfare, order, yakety smackety that's utilized to marginalize the people on the roadways, right? That's my argument with the police and wavy. I don't hate the police. I don't hate anybody. But I will remand them. I will correct them. I will scold them because I'm the church. They are my servants, right? So I can't force them to adhere to the Ten Commandments, but they can't force me to commit blasphemy. They have no authority over me. Neither the state nor federal government has any authority over the church. Yeshua, if you want to put it into the racism aspect and everything else, Yeshua was a black Jew that proclaimed salvation is of the Jews, per John 4:22, with Romans 2, clarifying that Jew isn't one by heredity, but by obedience to the tribe, which is the Ten Commandments, the foundation of the country. Now, 1700 years ago, Emperor Constantine changed the Sabbath to Sunday, a literal day to worship the sun, which breaks two of the Ten Commandments in process. No other gods before me, as well as the weekly Sabbath, right? So if you want to go up against white nationalism wave, you have to keep in mind that they're following Yeshua, which was instilling the Ten Commandments, which it doesn't matter, again, what your skin tone and your heredity is. Modern Christians aren't Christians and Orthodox Jews aren't Jews. Doesn't matter if you're part of the Protestant Reformation movement, or Catholic, or an Ashkenazi Jew, right? Or Orthodox Jew, in other words, because none of them follow the Ten Commandments. The Ashkenazi Jews don't follow the Ten Commandments, or the Torah in general, right? Torah being Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, right? They're Freemasons, right? Look at, again, George Washington, Freemason. Benjamin Franklin, Freemason. Lyndon Johnson, Freemason. Great Reset agenda. Satanic Church is basically what they've been creating for many decades, right? And you probably go along with it under the principle that, well, the government's there to protect me and they create laws that are protecting me, when the reality is they just want power and control. And they're utilizing people like you that don't know any better to give up your freedoms. And by giving up your freedoms, now you have a government that can control your every thought and your every movement, right? Alright, so I don't remember where I left off, but basically the essence of the country is at those Ten Commandments, right? So you have the Ishmaelites and what have you, and I don't hate anybody. The Ishmaelites, aka Muslims, are related to the Israelites, and a lot of people don't understand that Native Americans could be some of the original Israelites, no different than me being a former member of Black Hebrew Israelite Church, to where I believe that they're part of the original Israelites too, right? I knew that even before I went to that church, but they wanted to permeate this. Well, if you have lighter skin tones, or if you're white or wavy, then you're automatically bad, right? Because your skin tone is what can determine how weak you are, in other words, right? So that's black supremacy, right? So a lot of various things are going on in this world. That's why, again, when it comes to the Ten Commandments, it's completely indiscriminate, right? It has no basis on skin tone, it has no basis on heredity. And if you're following the Gregorian calendar, which the majority do in our society, then that's Catholic propaganda, right? Gregorian calendar, as well as the Julian calendar, to which it was derived from, are both solar calendars, and the biblical calendar is a lunar calendar. The Ashkenazi Jews aren't actually Jews, they're Freemasons. You draw a Star of David on the back of a United States dollar bill, which is actually a symbol of Baal, and it spells Mason with the all-seeing of an eye of horse at the top, right? Ashkenaz stems off the line of Japheth. The Israelites stem off the line of Shem, right? That's why it's called anti-Semitic, is anti-Shemitic, because it's against Shem's lineage, right? So that said, there's a lot of things. That's the other aspect of the Freemasons. Charles Darwin may have been a Freemason himself, but his dad and his grandfather definitely were. I went to college for engineering. Prior to going to college for engineering, I could debunk evolution theory and the Big Bang theory on purely scientific principles, because it's superficial in nature, which the majority of society is superficial in nature. That's why you have a lot of misinformation, disinformation being permeated, because people want to control everybody else because they're control freaks, right? My family is alienated against me, but they've been alienated against me for quite some time, because I'll correct a police officer. They're my subordinates. They are the lowest level of executive branch. The people are the highest level executive branch. They have no authority unless we give them that authority. If they don't have our consent, they can be scolded. And we, being the church, I can rebuke devils. Anybody that's disobedient to Yahweh and His 10 Commandments are children of Hashatan. That doesn't matter who the public servant is. Shalom.